Show this. Good evening. My name is Helen Anthony, Chair of the Committee on Finance for the Providence City Council. I'm calling to order our regular meeting on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023 at 5:38 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Chairwoman Helen Anthony,
Present.
Vice Chairman James Taylor.
Here.
Councilor Sue Engelbart. Present. Councilor Miguel Sanchez.
Present.
We have 4 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank very much. We have Councilor Shelley Peterson with us this evening, Councilor Mary Kay Harris, Councilor Jonathan Saltz. I thank you very much for attending this evening. We also have Evie Shaw, who is our solicitor this evening, so I appreciate that. And of course, our clerks are the best ever, so thank you so much.
So noted.
That
included everybody.
So if I could have a motion to take number 2 out of order.
So moved. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Motion made by Councilor Anderblaw, seconded by Councilor Taylor. And, Madam Clerk, please read item number 2.
Item number 2, an ordinance approving the capital improvement plan for the fiscal year 2024 through 2028. The following have been invited: Carmen Hawkins, Chief Operating Officer, Mayor's Office, and Amanda Pontarelli, Acting Director, Department of Public Property.
Thank you so much for coming. If we can swear everyone in.
Please raise your right hands. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And please state your names for the record.
Lawrence Nancy, the Chief Financial Officer to the Providence.
Brittany Hawkins, and Chief Operating Officer, Sandy Parker.
Commander Pontarelli, acting director of public law.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming, although I can't see the team. Chief. I can't see.
Oh, sorry.
You wanna come this in?
See that?
Call any clerks.
You could just judge.
Don't worry. I will be doing it.
Thank you.
I just let that eye contact. Yeah.
So do I, thank you.
Okay. All right, may I have a motion to substitute, we have an ordinance, you have a copy, I believe, before you, item number 2, we have an amendment of the actual ordinance for the CIP. And then I have a motion to mark that as exhibit 1. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Sorry, you're receiving it now. My apologies. I just want to make sure we have this all in front of us before we proceed. Thanks, John. I also got this. Don't mark this as a separate. We also have, a revised proposed capital improvement plan overview. And I would like that to be marked as exhibit 2.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Anderblaw, seconded by Councilor Taylor. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, now we have the amendments before us, and I will turn it over to Director Hall.
Sure. So the amendment that you have before you in terms of the plan, there are no changes since I was previously here to the allocations for public works, public property. We have made some changes to the Parks Department, which I think many of those have been socialized with all of you all, and there was one addition to the planning budget. So happy to discuss whatever is top of mind for the councilors, but everything in this document reflects changes that we've been working on together since the last meeting.
Okay, and I'll add, thank you very much, Chief. I'm sorry, I called you Director. Courtney, thank you. So just to bring everyone up to date, there have been some changes made since the original presented CIP, and in short, we have discussed specifically, we have only discussed changes in the parks budget. We did not touch the public works, public property, or planning. But there were some concerns, and we will be discussing this further this evening. There were some concerns about an allocation of $3.5 million for the Adrian Parkway project, and I think we all needed to educate ourselves on that, and we're going to receive another education this evening. We have invited guests tonight that are going to testify. So what we did is basically agreed to allocate those monies over for the Adrian Hall Parkway over a longer period of time, so that we would have more funds to, basically address the immediate repairs we were hoping to make in the parks. Budget, CIP, I should say, I'm sorry, we have, a long list of parks that have been, scheduled for improvements and repairs, and so what we did is we took some of that money that is going to be allocated to the Adrian Way Park Way. And so I'm adding some words to that, and then we reallocated that to some of the more immediate needs in the Parks Department. So I know you've received or should have received some written explanation of that from Kyle Delgado via email. We also have some red lines done by Gina Costa on these items, but the exhibit we just marked reflects all of those changes. And so I just wanted to be able to answer any questions anyone might have on what we've been doing since our last meeting. Any questions from any counselors? Yes.
Not a question or a comment. I just want to thank you, Chairwoman, and also the administration team for coming together over the last 2 weeks to make this a much stronger proposal that includes like all of the input from the counselors, and also for the folks in the community. So I think it really helped us out there.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. There is an outstanding concern, and I want to make sure we're addressing this because we do have some guests tonight, who I would like to hear from. We've got Katie Lieberman, who is the executive director at Trinity Rec. We've got Will Morgan, who is the Friends of the Adrian Way Skate Park, who is here to. Pardon, I'm sorry, Will Cornwall, Will Cornwall, who is here to speak on behalf of the skateboarders. And the reason I've asked them both to come is, while we are, conceptually agreeing to, possibly fund this, Adrian Way project, I thought we should hear a little more from both parties, because unfortunately, I don't think they've been able to really yet they haven't been able to get together and agree on a shared vision. And I think that is going to be an important part of how we move forward with this project. And I just will say that we are not giving up any final approval. So my concern was, coming and approving this money this evening for this particular project. If we did, I was worried that the skate park would not have the ability to meaningfully engage in a discussion on a joint vision. So this by no way should be interpreted to mean that the skate park is not going to be continued and in place moving forward. And so I just wanted to make sure that we have another opportunity as a council to come forward. To approve this project, and we will. My understanding is that if there is any improvements from Trinity Rec that extend into the public way, that the council is going to have to vote on either an easement or an abandonment. And so that we will have another opportunity as a council to look at this project moving forward to ensure that there's a shared vision as to how this space is going to be used by the existing skate park and also Trinity Rec. And so I'm very, very excited that we have Katie Lieberman, who I would ask to be sworn in and kind of give us an overview of that project for Trinity Rec. Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Please swear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and nothing but the truth. And you already stated your name, right?
Yes, Kate Lieberman. Please proceed. Thank you so much for coming. We're very excited, as many of us have already toured the Trinity Rep and you have done a very good job of presenting your vision for the space. And we would just love basically an overview on where you are right now and what you're planning.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilwoman, and thank you again for having me here. It's an honor to be able to speak with all of you, and I'm happy to speak tonight, but I will also put out the public offer. If anyone would like to come on the tour, I've given it to Councilwoman Anthony and Councilwoman Paz, and also to Councilman Gonzalez, so as well as to Councilman Miller. So happy to offer that toward other folks. Just to give as you offered, a little bit of an overview, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Trinity Rep, we are celebrating our 60th anniversary season this year, but we moved into the building that we are currently in, which is sort of on the corners of Empire, Fountain, and Washington Street, and then Adrian Hallway is the borderline on the other corner. So we have streets on all four sides of the building. That building has been in Providence since 1917. It's on the National Historic Register, was originally a vaudeville house here in Providence. It's gone through many iterations. Trinity Rep moved in 1972, and we've been in that space since that time. In 2017, which is the sort of centennial year of the building, Trinity Rep, our staff and our board, we took on a facility master plan to understand our needs as an institution and what we could do to expand accessibility, in particular to the building. We have a huge accessibility issue, as you may have experienced if you've been to the theater, or you could imagine, acknowledging it's a 100-year-old building, and we're trying to ensure that the building is accessible for audiences and students from around the state. We're the State Theater of Rhode Island, and we feel deeply committed to being accessible to everyone throughout the state. And after completing that review in 2018, we began meeting with a group of stakeholders, which included Will and the folks from the skate park, as well as the folks from the Civic Center parking garage, Josh Miller and the folks at the brew house who are at the other corner, to begin, and the department planning and parks, to bring everyone together to talk about what was, what our needs were, as what was becoming very clear is that Trinity Rep needed to expand, and the other three sides of our building were blocked off by significantly public streets. And since 2018, there's been a lot of ebb and flow, as you may have heard about the ideas of this project. In 2018, we actually did come to the City Council and request an abandonment of Adrian Hallway for 2 years, which was granted and has since expired. And as Councilman Anthony mentioned, we will likely be back for further requests. We are in the midst of conversation actually with Bob Azar to think about the best possible way and proposal to do that with all of you. So that conversation is underway. Currently, we've had a significant amount of forward momentum on the project right now, and as we are imagining it, the project will include an addition to Trinity Rep that would add about 20,000 square feet for us, that would push the physical footprint of the theater out to the edge of the sidewalk and up to the roof of the building. Acknowledging that this is I'm not even making a proposal today. This is currently the idea. Acknowledging that there have to be we've not gone through permitting, we have not gone through any proposal requests, but what we need to do right now, we're in what's called the design development phase. We're meeting with architects to create a rendering so that we can understand the complexities of what that construction will entail and what that will require from the city. In addition, what we had talked about as early as 2018 with that group of stakeholders was to take Adrian Hallway offline for vehicular traffic to make it safer for skaters as well as for pedestrian use. And as a part of the long-term vision, what we would hope to do with the space, in conversation with those stakeholders, especially with the skaters, is to create a safe, accessible pedestrian plaza in Adrian Hallway that we would maintain. And that would allow for safer access for folks coming from the parking lot into the theater, as well as even folks coming all the way from I'm thinking, the convention center. There's pedestrian access all the way through to Westminster. I did bring preliminary renderings if folks are interested in seeing them. And I say the term preliminary as like italics and underlined, and I just want to acknowledge, I mentioned we're in design development, which means we are still working towards even being able to make a presentation for abandonment and to make a presentation for the needs for public works. But we need to do this work to have the early renderings so that we can then come to you with these proposals and so that we can understand the scope of costs that are necessary to do this. So we've been meeting with project managers at Peregrine Group, who some folks might be familiar with. They're local to the city of Providence,
And with Gil Bain, we're helping us understand the scope of the needs of what it would require to expand the building. It would require a movement of utilities further away from the footprint of the building underground. And then the rehabilitation of what is currently Adrian Hallway into that pedestrian space. So I brought some copies of renderings. Oh, thank you. And just acknowledge, there's what's in that packet in color includes early renderings, and the friends of Adrian Hallway from the city park have also seen these. This is, again, a visionary idea. These are not orders set in stone. This is not approved by anyone. This is what's helping us to have conversations like I'm having tonight with potential stakeholders as well as supporters, because Trinity Rep is going to be investing a significant amount of our own funds and private funding that we're fundraising for ourselves independently to be able to take on this work. So acknowledging that this is very preliminary. So a couple things I'll point out in what you're looking at. One is that you can see that there's a big addition on the building. It is a historic building. We're in separate conversations with the Historic Preservation and Heritage Council and the City of Providence with regards to the look and feel of the exterior to make sure that we're consistent with the historic requirements, because we are in a building that is on the register. So just acknowledging that I'm not here today to present that to you, and that's as a part of our design work, we're actually going back and forth with them right now. This is not the final design of the exterior of the space, and we are trying to be really good partners in that work and have taken a lot of their feedback back to adjusting the renderings. And I say that because we are eager to be good partners with the city and with the folks at the skate park and with the parks to continue to sit down and review renderings and ground plans to talk about. I don't even want to use the term borders, because I believe this is going to be a fluid space, that the space between the proposed addition and the skate park will be used by pedestrians, by theater goers, by skaters, by anyone coming through the city of Providence. You will see in the images that there is proposed seating, tables and chairs. I know it's been an item of concern about the location and whether those are fixed or removable, and we are up for conversation about the location and the square footage and the number of tables and all of that. What I'm acknowledging is these are drawings to help inspire the idea of what we would like to create from a pedestrian accessibility use, and putting the idea of having a plaza in this location, but nothing you're seeing is final or approved. And then the last thing I just wanted to share is we are really committed to Adrian Hallway in particular, and I don't know if everybody, folks know here, but the city of Providence named that alleyway Adrian Hallway in the early 2000s after Adrian Hall, who was the founder of Trinity Rep. And we feel very strongly about the stewardship and care of that space because of its namesake. Adrian Hall actually died just last February at the age of 95. It was a loss to the American theater overall, especially the city of Providence. And we are committed also acknowledging that by adding this pedestrian plaza, there will be a certain amount of maintenance that's required, whether that be snow removal and tree trimming and other requirements, and certainly in conversation with parks and public works, but we are prepared to take on the cost and the maintenance of some of those public spaces as well as needed. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Questions? I don't mind starting. This is so helpful. I really appreciate your time. And so I just want to, it's helpful to me because I know that when we're looking at just the rough estimate of the scope of work for this project that the city is going to be buying, you know, that I was unsure of the amount because I wasn't sure exactly what was being done. But it looks to me like either we're going to be raising the level of the street or taking the curbs down. Is that what's going on the, you know, just I know this is preliminary.
No, yes, the idea is that we would be raising what is currently the street level to sidewalk level for a portion of the street. And continuing to the term idea, but the idea would be that on the Washington Street side, there would be a curb pull-in for folks who need to up or drop offs. That's from an accessibility point of view for Trinity Rep patrons who can't park and walk, that there's a sort of a curb. It's not actually visible in that rendering. And that on the Fountain Street side, there would be some of a ramp that takes you up to that level so that there is some street level access. Because there will need to be, as I understand, emergency vehicular access to the theater, acknowledging the numbers of people who come in and out of the space, as well as access for, trucks, because there's dumpsters that need pickup from the brew house and from Trinity, as well as other sort of drop-offs and deliveries. So there will be a, and I'd say the idea is, the proposal would be that on the Fountain Street side, it would start at street level and then come up to the sidewalk level on the other end. So there would be a slow break there. The square footage and where that happens and how that interacts with the skate park is all up for conversation, and why we're eager to be around the table with the skaters to make sure that we're doing this in conversation with the other stakeholders who are using that space.
Okay, all right. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just want to thank you for your leadership and for all the work that you're doing. And, you know, have supported the initial funding that was going to be allocated for this project. Say that for the record. And I would encourage you to maybe come before the council again, should there be additional needs. And I also just want to say thank you to the skaters as well. Will Cornwall, everyone who's a part of that initiative to make sure that there is ongoing dialogue with all the parties involved. So we certainly urge everyone to be collaborative and to work together to ensure that we have the best possible plans moving forward. So thank you for your leadership and for all of the people.
Okay, you want to final, is there another meeting scheduled with the Friends of the Skate Park?
We would like to have a meeting. I know Will and I had an email exchange just last night to try and find a time. We would like to have a meeting around a table, actually looking at the ground plan with the architects, so we can really talk about location and need. And this is going to be an ongoing process. We're looking at I'll say this phase of design development. Our plan is that this will take us through the end of January. And then we go into another round of design. I'm still learning all this. I sound like an expert, but I'm a theater person and I'm learning this as we go. We then go through another round of design where we create the construction documentation, which will significantly involve not just the skaters, but the city, as that will get us into conversations about the movement of utilities underground and what's needed. And of course, there'll then be a permitting process. So we'll have a lot of requests for the council and for the mayor's office between now and probably next fall.
And finally, will there be a clear delineation as to what are the costs that are going to be taken on by Trinity Rep as opposed to the city? Because when we talk about moving underground utilities, I'm sure some of those are under the street.
Yes.
But I want to be very careful that the city is not going to be assuming any of the cost that Trinity Rep will have to incur to install their vision on this addition.
Of course, thank you for asking that, Councilwoman. The funds that are articulated as a part of the CIP amendment, and thank you to Courtney in the mayor's office for helping us to navigate that, would take on all of that addition. That helps us take on the cost for the underground work for the utilities, as well as some of the restoration of Adrian Hallway, because of course we have to rip it up to get underground and move things, and then to restore and to beautify the space. The entirety of the project, including the addition to the theater, as well as some of the above ground work and access points, is a $31 million project. So we're fundraising at our end. We're seeking federal funds, we're seeking state funds, we have funding from foundations and corporations, as well as a number of individual supporters of Trinity and some of our own investment. So this is a significant project for us and the biggest capital campaign that we've ever had at Trinity Rep. We're very grateful for the city to have some investment in it, acknowledging that our hope is that this will have a huge impact on the experience of anyone coming downtown, not just the folks who are coming to the theater. If you're just coming through and you're having dinner at Gracie's and you want to go through the park to walk over to the convention center, that it feels safe, that it feels welcoming. So we see that there's a lot of impact there, but certainly we're not asking the city to take on any of those additional funds. I think there will be, knowing that Trinity Rep ourselves, we can't move the utilities on our own anyway, so we're going to be working hand in hand with the city, as I understand, in whatever needs to happen in moving things underground. For full transparency, and I'm not the expert on it, but what I've learned is that there's a significant amount of electrical that is through Rhode Island Energy as well as sewer. And those are the most significant items that need to move slightly away from Empire Street towards the parking garage, so that they are out of what's required through the regulatory process for safe pedestrian use and safe use of the addition of the building.
Any other, yes?
Thank you, Chairman.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Katie, so much for this information. It's super helpful. Just trying to grasp a better sense of a timeline. When did this conversation start with administration regarding these specific allocations? I don't know if it's better answered by people's in the mayor's office.
I can speak to when I had the chance to speak with Mayor Smiley, and I don't know if other folks in the mayor's office want to speak to it. And just for full transparency, I first started at Trinity Rep last September, and as a part of my role taking this on, coming to Trinity, it's my role to help move this project forward, to ensure the next 60 years of Trinity Rep. It was in February of 23 that myself and Kurt Columbus, artistic director, had a chance to first sit down with the mayor just to brief him on the idea that we were trying to move this forward from when we had really pulled back during the pandemic, and to let him know what we were thinking about. Over the summer, we had the chance to offer a tour to Councilwoman Anthony and Councilwoman Andubois and Councilwoman Miller. And then this fall, we had the chance again to meet with the mayor and explain the real level of detail that we've been going through as a part of this design development process, so that we can understand the total costs for some of the work. And that's where we began the discussion probably a few months ago with regards to this proposal here.
The specific ask didn't come to the mayor's office till like November 1st.
The actual dollars, yes.
So that kind of lines up with when you guys did the revision to us.
It was, I mean, it
Right.
was as part of lots of revisions that were made to the city. This was added. They were not scheduled in concert.
Yeah, no, that lines up. Yeah, just because we didn't have this back in April or whenever, so
This
that would
project
make
was not
sense.
come to us.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. Katie, when's the last conversation that you had with the skateboard group?
The last conversation I had with Will was on the phone last Friday. The last meeting we had was, we were, in late October, we stood outside in Atrium hallway discussing the plans. It wasn't a great meeting. I understand that it was not didn't go the way anybody wanted, and we offered to sit down. Actually, we offered to take the plans back that we reviewed with the skaters and make some adjustments, and we haven't been able to find a time that they've been able to see the adjustments that we've made to make that proposal to get everyone around the table. My instinct is to do it. I prefer meetings instead of email. It's my personal preference, is to be able to sit and look at an actual map and say, this is what we need and this is what we need, and so that we can work together. My hope is that this ends up being a shared space for everyone in the city, that it has access for Trinity patrons, it has access for Trinity staff, it has access for skaters, it has access for the average pedestrian walking through who, wants to have space. And how do we ensure that Adrian Hallway becomes safe and accessible for that entire population and not just for any small few?
Yeah, no, kind of.
Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
And I commend you for that. I think this is a really good experience for local government opportunity, where there's some differences, but I mean, we're doing the right thing, all coming to the table and see where we can agree and move forward. What is because just what I don't want it to happen is we're all back here in 6 months on complete opposite ends. How flexible are you with the needs of the skateboard community here in Providence in terms of the physical plans? Because these are pretty drastic plans, and I will say, I mean, I'm supportive of the art community here, and I think it's great that we're improving these public spaces. I know Parks is always looking to create public spaces, and I'm always a big proponent of that. I'd say we should do pedestrian on Westminster. I'll throw that out there right now while we're at it. That's a conversation for another day. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I just want to get understanding and see how flexible, we obviously don't know how that conversation happened back in October, but it seems at least from, and we'll hear more from the group right now in a bit. But it seems like they're not too pleased with the current situation. So I think for me, at least, to feel comfortable moving forward, I mean, just how much are you willing to give or negotiate, communicate, whatever way you.
I'm desperate to have a conversation with the skaters around the table and find a way forward.
Right.
So, it's a shared space. We've been sharing this space for as long as the skate park has been there. The theater's been there for 60 years. The building's been there and it's current as a use as a theater, whether that was for vaudeville or movies. So, that space has been shared as long as the skate park has been there, and we're very eager to find a path forward that we can all agree to. I don't think anyone wants to step on, certainly, I should speak for Trinity, we don't want to step on anyone's toes. We also have to acknowledge that there are regulatory requirements that we have to follow with regards to the utilities needs, the safety needs, the lighting and accessibility, ADA compliance, all of those things. So we are working also within our own constraints, and those constraints and needs of the city. But with all of those constraints together, I still think that there's a path forward, and all we would like is actually to be able to sit with the skate park and find a way to make sure that we're sharing that space thoughtfully and constructively.
Thank you, Claire, I appreciate that.
Hey, before we go any further, I appreciate sorry, I'm gonna just mark these for this. We will be marking we have a letter from Amy, and also the enlarged printouts that you brought today. I'd like to mark this as exhibit 3. Okay, exhibit 3. We have a motion.
Second.
All right, motion by Councilor Engelbach, seconded by Councilor Sanchez. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and go ahead. Yes, thank you. Wonderful.
That's one final question. Katie, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. You had mentioned earlier about the ongoing care of the Adrian hallway and so I wear on council, I'm also on the Parks Commission. And my initial concern is like, ooh, adding an additional park where there isn't one, do we have funding for maintenance and care of that? So you would talk a little bit about like Trinity's care for that space and your future of wanting to take care of that. Can you talk a little bit about that? And like, are you planning to codify that with the administration, or is that like an agreement if you,
I'll say, I'm not a legal expert.
Yeah.
So I think when you guys asked about codifying that with administration, I would be interested in that. Actually, some of the conversation we can start having with bodies are, as well as some folks at the city, and certainly with Parks Commission, but we, and we do this already because we occupy sidewalks on 3 other sides of the building that require pedestrian access. So we are regularly snow blowing and plowing and salting and providing safe access. We're also trimming trees and doing that type of work. The hope is that as a part of some of this pedestrian plaza, that there will be some added plantings and greenery. Some of that will actually help some of the stormwater retention as well, as we think about drainage and other elements of design that can be beautiful parts of drainage instead of streets. And so we are willing to take on that type of care of the space.
okay, thank you.
However, that needs to be codified. I leave that to further discussion. So that's a little bit beyond my capacity.
Thank you.
Hey, any more questions? Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
And so I'd like to next hear from Will Cornwall. And I'm sorry for calling you Will Morgan. I don't know what is going on with me. But thank you. I'll have you sworn in.
You swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God.
I did.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate everyone's diligence here. It's a pretty small piece of square footage that we're discussing in the grand scheme of your CIP plan, so I appreciate the time that's being given to it. This park was constructed in 1981 with funding left over from a Carter administration or the original program. It was considered a gift to the director Adrian Hall from Buddy Scansey as a public theater. You can kind of see architecturally, you can kind of see it's supposed to be like a postmodern stage of some sorts for public theater. And as told to me by people from the theater, it's a gift that the theater, that Adrian Hall was not enthusiastic to receive. He had no interest in programming and doing public theater. From what I can tell from the Providence Journal archives, it had a single season of public programming. And then it kind of failed to really serve a public function, at least for another decade, until it became a popular space for skateboarders. They were actually originally attracted to the area because where the brew house now was a Burger King. And so they go to the Burger King and then the park was right next door, and it was kind of a fallow downtown space that nobody else had really claimed. And you could get your burger, you could escape this place where you wouldn't get kicked out. And so that kind of been the story of the space up until 2015, when I was able to secure a small bit of funding from Levi's, the gym company, or to build something permanent and skatable. And I worked with Lynn McCormick at Arts, Culture and Tourism, and she put me in touch with the park department. And we did a small architectural intervention with a tiny budget of $2,000. That was November 2015. And it really transformed the space overnight. You know, overnight it was getting more use in a single day than it would get in an entire year. And so with that success, we formed our friends group, the Friends of Adrian Hallway, and a partnership with Providence Parks. That was 2016. To kind of formalize our community's efforts to renovate the space. And we moved forward. We met with the that was kind of the beginning of the stakeholder meetings with the Civic Center Garage. We've changed ownership since then. The brew house and Parks Department and the theater. And we were able to fundraise approximately $40,000 with a very competitive grant from the Tony Hawk Foundation. Our community group designed and renovated this park, and with the blessing of the Parks Department and with their material assistance. And that ribbon cutting was in 2018. And after the success of that renovation and redesign, the conversation then shifted to within the stakeholder group to the larger redevelopment of the alleyway in its entirety. And that's 5 years ago now. And over the course of the last 5 years, what's the word? Kind of the viability of the theater's addition plans have kind of waxed and waned. It was on and then it was off and then it's back on again. But throughout that time, within our stakeholder group, we had achieved a consensus, which was that whether the theater addition happens or not, that an expansion of the recreational space over the adjacent street was to the benefit of everyone. We have, as our community group has been stewarding the park, you know, since 2016, we do annual cleanups. You know, it's not perfect down there, but we think we do a pretty good job of taking care of the space, considering we have no annual operating budget. We cobble it together with the Earth Day cleanup grants, and we make it happen. And mostly we're able to make it happen because it means so much to us. We're a volunteer group. We juggle many different schedules to make it all happen, but it means a lot to all of us, so we make it a point to take care of it. Over the course of the last year, my role in kind of founding this group has been to convince the skateboarders and all the stakeholders of kind of an alignment of goals between all of us. Because there are some obviously large differences between the brew house ownership and the skateboard community and the theater. And it has not been easy to convince my skateboard community that the theater has some sort of alignment of goals with us. And over the course of the last year, it's just kind of become impossible for me to convince the skateboard community that that's the case anymore. So in May 2008, we were shown an engineering drawing, which I have in front of me, which shows their addition plans to be substantially larger than the curb line, which Katie just mentioned. Yeah,
Yes.
2008 or 2018?
2018.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, wow, it's not back yet.
We were shown an engineering drawing in May, which showed their expansion being several feet beyond the curb line, which had there's been a long-standing verbal agreement amongst the stakeholders. That had been the footprint of the addition during their last attempt at building the addition in 2019. And we weren't told actually that the footprint was bigger. We had to take a very close look at this drawing and discover that for ourselves. And we put our concerns in an email about how if you shrink the space that's available, it becomes much more difficult for us all to share it. By the drawing that's in front of me, it looks like the space has shrunk by at least the width of ADA accessibility. It looks to be between 3 and 4 feet, maybe 5 in some places.
Can I just interrupt for 1 minute, Councilor Ingersoll?
Thank you so much. Just thank you, Chairwoman. A quick question, what drawing do you have in front of you? Is it the same drawing we have? Because if that's from 2018, it sounds like there's been updates, so I'm not sure.
This is an engineering drawing that was shared with us in May
Of this year. or
of this year.
Okay.
We put those concerns in an email, got no response. We raised those concerns again in October, an in-person meeting. And I followed up with an email asking for the drawings that they promised us. I still haven't received a response, or I still haven't received those drawings. And so the feeling amongst our group was that each time that we met the theater this year, the space that was originally by consensus was considered best for expansion of recreational area was now shrinking. Every time we met the theater this year, our space was shrinking and it wasn't even being acknowledged. And so that was kind of the atmosphere within our group when the news of a $3.5 million allocation dropped. And so with that news being received, we were pretty skeptical about our place in the development going forward. And what we really wanted was to see any plan in writing for how the $3.5 million would be allocated, anything at all, a spreadsheet, anything in writing. Because of the previous 2 meetings of that year, conversation was not going to be sufficient for us. You know, our trust in the theater had really declined to a point where we needed something in writing that honored the previous consensus that we had established over the course of years of meetings. And that kind of remains our position, is that we understand the needs of the theater for the function of their addition. We understand the needs of emergency vehicles for egress. We understand the need for vehicle access for deliveries. We understand the brew house's needs. And we are willing to negotiate on what the final shape of the space is. But we need a real commitment from the theater that they will honor the conversation we've already had.
Okay, I think that's, and I will also say, I'm gonna just take, we have a background on Trinity Skate Park spot, which you have prepared, and also an update on both documents. I'd like to have distributed and marked as the next exhibit. I think it's 4. And thank you so much, because these were very well prepared, and I appreciate the amount of time that you did on the background, because it really is. So it's the significance, you know, of the skate park and the history and how much effort it took to create this space. So I have a motion to mark as exhibit 4, I think.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Ingersoll, seconded by Counselor Sanchez, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? So I appreciate the fact that, first of all, let me open up for questions or comments. Anything from our, maybe members?
Yeah, I think that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a comment and a question. Will, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come out here in front of us. I personally don't skate, but I have a couple cousins who've grown up around the skateboarding scene, and they are frequent users of the Adrian Hallway skate park. So I know what this recreational space has done for a lot of kids and youth in our community. And just like broadly speaking, I think it's important to listen and take in consideration the needs of the skateboarding community in any city. It's definitely an identity. It's even part of our community as a whole. So yeah, I mean, this seems like a very interesting situation that we're at. For lack of better words. So I mean, my only question to Will is like, have you seen this, and like, do you have any preliminary thoughts on what something like this would do, or how this would interact with the current footprint of the skate park?
Well, yeah, I have seen it. The theater patrons are a much different demographic than who uses the skate park. And what we're talking about is a space that is intentionally designed to be intergenerational in a way that public spaces in the city are not. And that's a real challenge, to make a space that serves the recreational needs of the skaters, but also is respectful of the rights of the theater patrons to get to and from their shows. I don't downplay that challenge at all. It's a very real. So, as I said earlier, when you shrink the space, it makes it all that much harder for these two groups that, operate side by side. So, we always knew that the theater addition would be taking up some area, but it seems to be just kind of growing unchecked, despite our concerns. So yeah, it just going forward, it just becomes a tricky. It's just the idea of intergenerational space becomes less and less realistic. When you make the space smaller and smaller, what's going to happen is one group's going to win.
Okay, I'm gonna recognize the chief.
I thought Councilwoman Anthony's point at the beginning was important, and like everything everyone is saying is so compelling. Any easement into any public space has to come back to the council. Thank you.
Yeah, we know that.
Right, so like the work of, can people get to a compromise? Can there be a design that works for, like, that work needs to get done? If that work can't get done, and the council doesn't approve this work, then the funding in the CIP will get reallocated. Right, and so I just want to remind us that this is $135 million of projects. And this project will come back to the council specifically for approval after the work of the design and negotiations happen.
And I do appreciate that, and I think it's important, because as I said in the beginning, you know, I don't want our passage of this to be an indication that it's a done deal. Therefore, you know, we don't want to cut your ability as the Friends of the Skateboard Park ability to negotiate. And so, we're still keeping that pressure very much on, and we'd like there to be, you know, some sort of, I know what you're saying, possibly incompatible uses, but if there's any way of a shared vision or working this out, we would like to see that. And certainly it's going to be important, because if we are going to have to grant an easement or an abandonment of the road, we're going to want to see that there's been some sort of movement. So I just want to say that, you know, I think we've really articulated very clearly your concern, and how it's not being answered.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I wasn't done.
I'm so.
Thank you, Will. So what? I mean, I'm just trying to get like a better understanding of like what the vision of, so I know we like separated the line item of like the skate park. What was the intention behind that, or what? Because that doesn't really do anything in terms of like the skate park concern, or I'm just trying to.
Go ahead. Oh, I thought that the reason to call them out was to like demonstrate that like the lump sum wasn't just for the work that would benefit the theater and the non-skate park, but to be clear about the intention that the amount that they knew they needed for expansion was built into the CIP. And so I know it's not the be all end all, but I think that that was the intention, to demonstrate the support for those improvements, even though there's still a conversation we had about how that happens, but to like have it called out because you get lumped into the larger line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
I don't want to make you mad by interrupting you.
I never get mad, Courtney.
The previous CIP had a line for $350,000
Yeah.
improvements, and so I felt like it was an oversight to put that in the other one and not acknowledge that that one was there, because as these teams work together to negotiate around the other pedestrian improvements, if that money can't be used, the 350 will remain on a separate line for the, you know, the improvements that this group has been working on in the Parks Department previously.
Can we get the parks director's like opinion, or I don't know, Wendy, do you have anything else to add to this whole
We
conversation?
could have Wendy come up if you don't. Are we finished with?
Yeah, yeah.
Ask any more questions as well?
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
I actually just want to know a little bit more about what your vision for the recreational space, what it is for you. I have a little bit of an understanding here, but I'm trying to captivate both, and I see very well what Trinity is looking to do, but I'd like to know a little bit about what you're trying to do, or your vision.
It's very simple. You guys may be familiar with, you know, the skating rink in Kennedy Plaza, when it's not covered in ice, it's just an open flat space, and an open expanse of smooth concrete is enough to entertain skateboarders. We don't, that's kind of all we're asking for, is an open, protected space that's smooth. And, you know, we would like to have some features added onto the existing footprint if possible. But even just an open, smooth space that doesn't have vehicle traffic is considered an asset for us. And in doing so, we think that respects the needs for deliveries for the neighbors, and also respects the historical use for events. As in the past, the brew house and the theater have shut down the street, erected tents and whatnots to host events there. And with the open, you know, floor plan, so to speak, they could accommodate all of that. Yeah, what's kind of been the sticking point, I guess, is kind of the terminology that's concerned us and what we've received in writing from the theater. While it may appear to be an open pedestrian plaza or pedestrian mall as they're describing it, we feel like it does need to be declared as a primarily recreational space. We are willing to share it, but well, all that we're asking is for the previous consensus to be recognized.
Thank you very much. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
Okay, yes, Councilor Harris.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sort of curious about the timeline and the timing of all of this.
Yeah.
I know earlier, I mean, it seems like it's a beginning conversation, it just started. As far as the group, your group coming together, attorney and yourself, started this year, right, the conversation?
No, we've been in stakeholder meetings since 2016.
Oh, 2016. Okay.
Yeah, but the conversation about this particular round of planning for their addition. We were first shown drawings and plans earlier this year in May.
So what would be, and this may be for the mayor's office, with negotiation and how much timing is allowed for this particular project and all the negotiation that needs to happen, or the shared, I guess the shared, connections to the land.
So before any work can get done. My understanding is that the project will have, Trinity's project has to go before the downtown review committee and the council. Once plans are developed, as it relates to the CIP, as another reminder, this document will come back to you in July as part of. In April as part of the proposed budget. So there are opportunities to adjust the CIP every year based on if we're making progress or not. So, you know, lots of you have funds allocated for projects in here that don't have concrete plans yet. Right, this kind of enables us to move to planning, and in a year, we may be changing lots of lines in this because the plans don't work out, that's just the nature of this. It's consistent with all of those other kinds of allocations.
Thank you, that's helpful. I was just trying to figure out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions for Will? Thank you so much for your
Sure. Yeah.
and your letters, thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll call.
I mean, it's your call. I think we have enough. I don't know.
Superintendent, do you have anything to add on this, yes, please.
Each round the penalty of perjury that the testimony or the affidavit is to help you that. And state your name.
So we were wondering if you have anything to add to this discussion on Adrian Parkway.
I do want to say that we have done multiple skate parks throughout the city, and we've added 8 since 2016. And Wilco Mall and Friends of Aging Hallway have been a part of every single one of them. The biggest one is almost $900,000 project. It's been in the Continent Park. And every time this new folks comes to us with just incredible generosity, professional acumen, we wouldn't do any of it without them. They've become real assets. That can make our city a much more stable place.
I appreciate that, and I guess I'm also, well, I have you here. I may have an ask, and I'll let you follow up the questions, but is it possible that you might help with this discussion on a shared vision?
Yeah, absolutely. And just in the reference also, there's a CIP allocation from 2021, I believe it was filed. For Aging Hallway for $150,000 improvements, but we've gotten close to hitting the go on those, but every time because of the Trinity plans, we've all pulled back on that. So we had a landscape architect that was originally assigned to this to sort of work and develop that vision and what the parameters of those are. So absolutely, we are in this 100% and we want to see this space be incredibly successful.
Questions? Comments?
Poor Wendy has been incredibly sick. So.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy.
Thank her. Well, we really appreciate it. So warriors. We all value tremendously your work, as you know, so we appreciate it.
This is, again, it's just incredibly important for us as a department and as a city to have these spaces, particularly for non-traditional sports, that these places for kids of all kinds of places for creativity. And in terms of stewardship, parks is great, we can pick up trash, we can do all those kinds of things, but these folks develop community around this space. We have parks who are working with conservation, come on and work with us in Parks Department in different iterations and try out some different career things. I like to think even Will himself might be going in the direction of something along those lines. We were out there side by side with them when we did this with our folks in backhoe and Will and his folks moving bricks and, redesigning things into this incredible place. So, well, I think people right now, I'm 100% convinced that, when this is done, this is all really, really proud of this department.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay. All right. I appreciate it. We're all finished with you, Superintendent. I mean, so my own leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The one last question I had, and I'm gonna, certainly open it up. But I had asked to have, not for you, but I had asked if we were gonna get any kind of explanation as to how the money was gonna be spent on streets, sidewalks, and sewers.
But we have done that presentation in Public Works. We are happy to have, it would be done consistent with the city's plan, which has been previously provided. We can come to this committee and do that also. We're not prepared to do, that's like a 45-minute to an hour long presentation.
Oh my God, seriously? Okay, thank you for not bringing that on today. So thank you so much, but we will be asking for that.
Yeah, we're
Just
happy
in-
to provide it.
I'll see if the other councils, I just want to make sure that we're all, it's very important, that all of us understand what the procedures are and what the thinking is, how that money is allocated and spent. Okay. Any other questions on the CIP, amended CIP? Yes, just wonderful.
Quick one, thank you, Chairwoman. Courtney, you had mentioned there was also a minor change in planning. What was that?
We were asked to have money for the Winnot's Protected River Water Project on Kingsley.
Oh, okay.
They needed match for their federal year.
Oh, great.
So that's the last
That's the last.
line you'll see there for $350,000. That will just fund part of that project so that they can draw down the federal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we can join by our auditor, Gina Croft. Do you have any questions? No. Okay, all right. Okay, with that, committee members, is there any discussion? Or are you ready to make a vote? Propose a vote?
Just a quick comment.
Please.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, no, I'll be honest, the CIP thing is something that I've been having to truly understand and grasp, and it's a interesting concept, trying to go back and understand what has been funded. Because we can allocate stuff, but sometimes the projects don't always kick off. So I mean, it's something that we really need full council and administration collaboration, especially with so many new councilors. I think there's a handful of us that, I mean, are sometimes out of the loop when it comes to projects like this or plans like this. So I think it's important that, I mean, we start conversations for the next CIP next week. But I mean, that's all I really had to say. I mean, I think most of this makes sense for the city. It's important that we're improving the infrastructure of the city that we live in and work in, and our residents pay taxes for. So I mean, I think you want to entertain a motion, I'll make a motion to approve this.
I'll second.
Approve as amended. As amended.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay, thank you very much. Motion made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Taylor. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, really appreciate it. The one thing I will say, is I would like to say thank Kyle.
I just did you like.
Want to move the traffic. I'll just say that Kyle, has been in, it's quite impressive to have him track these projects and, help us understand as council people how we can also, enhance these projects with our own funds and with our CDBG funds. And Kyle has, I felt very comfortable that he has been reaching out to all the council people to make sure that everyone's heard. And the projects are accounted for. So I wanted to special thanks, Kyle.
And Sam now too.
And I'll stand for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now we are going to do. Thank you, John.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Madam Clerk, please read item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from Susan DeRita, Chairwoman, Providence External Review Authority, dated November 7, 2023, that in accordance with the City of Providence Ordinance Chapter 18.5, Section 2, vote affirmatively to recommend the reappointment of Mr. Farron Caroli, Squire, as the Executive Director of FARA for an additional 2 years, starting January 1st, 2024, and expiring on December 31st, 2025, and submit the same for approval by the City Council.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to welcome him, please. Is the pronunciation Caroli or Caroli? Caroli, yes. If you wouldn't mind coming forward to be sworn in.
We clear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I hope you got it.
I do. Terrence Cole. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thank you, if you wouldn't mind just reviewing with us I can't find the exhibit. Do you have an exhibit? I believe you provided us with an annual report. Is that correct, Mr. Crowley?
Yes, and we asked for an addendum on up-to-date expenditures, which I also provided.
Okay. Is that attached? Okay. I think this is the agenda. Is there a report also?
The report was provided
In the back.
to the council back in March.
In March.
Yeah.
Okay, and that, okay.
Same as in the back of that. Thank you.
The addendum just gives current expenditures from, is asked for year to date.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just hitting, hold on, taking a second. I don't see it either. It's
No, only the attendance.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that we have, it's the report that was provided back in March. I'm sorry, it might be that the clerks didn't have a copy of that.
Well, all that is asked for tonight is an update, because the report was provided back in March, and that covered up to January.
Okay,
And so I provided from January to current time expenditures.
that's fine. Then maybe we can start by just giving us, an overview on summary, not necessarily the finances, but you have your report here.
Sure.
But just an overall overview of how you have served last 2 years and how you were achieving the, mission of para.
Sure. So there's been some challenges, to say the least. When I came on board, one of the first things that we got to do was to look at, and just maybe by way of background, para has existed since 2002, which is my creation by ordinance in the city, but has gone through multiple iterations and has been kind of went out of the unfunded and didn't exist for a period of time, and then was brought back in 2002. Funded, an executive director was hired, and the work began in trying to reestablish para. And that was obviously influenced by a lot of what was going on in the public sphere with police misconduct around the country. And you got George Floyd, and then you had Tyree Nichols, and all these additional incidents that happened in the public that kind of reinvigorated the conversation around what do we do to improve things like Providence. And the council member did a special thanks to Councilman Harris, who was instrumental in the creation of para and also the resurgence. And I got to work with her and speak with her a lot about what we need to do in this third iteration to try to actually get it. But so what happened was, how do we get oversight of the police department? And it was observed that you have a police oversight agency that just wasn't funded and wasn't operated, right? That's what para was. And so they worked to try to bring it back online, and then they met with, and this is before my time, but they met with some issues in terms of things being released during investigations, and the executive director at the time was let go. They went without an executive director for over a year, and it kind of languished again. And so I was hired, I came on board, and I did an analysis of the organization. I by way of this is a little bit of a rehash when I got hired for some of you, but some of you were not here during that meeting. But no, I was a police officer for 15 years. Prior to becoming an attorney, I was deputy chief of police. I have a background in police oversight, internal investigations. Then I became a defense attorney. I left policing to work as an attorney. And policing and oversight has always been an important issue for me. I think that there are very few professions that are left to self-police. Attorneys, obviously one of them, and police officers is often the other. And the issue with self-policing can often be that things go unchecked, underreported, or not properly addressed. So there's lack of transparency in self-policing, and that's why oversight is so important. And so when I came on board, one of the things that we did was we looked at the ordinance that created para and discovered that it was deficient in some key areas that are required for any type of oversight. And so one of the biggest glaring issues is that it lacks the authority to have unfettered access to records. And so if you just look at any oversight, we have the auditor here. I'll use auditing as an example. When you go to audit someone, you don't say to them, could you please give me the records that you think I need so that I can do my job? You have access to the records, they have to give you the records so that you can actually do the job with oversight. If a police officer gets a search warrant, they don't go to the house and say, we're investigating you for possession of drugs and drug activity. Can you please turn over any evidence in your house that may help our case? They're allowed to use that warrant to go in and get the information. But para was operating in the latter form. Para has always had to ask the police department to turn over records related to the investigations or the oversight or the audits that they wanted to do of completed internal investigations. So that's a severely handicapping position to begin with. And so I just bring that up because those are just some of the things that are still hindering para's ability. We have an ordinance amendment that is pending to come before the council hopefully soon that will address these issues. But so, I was looking at what we needed to do. We needed to change the ordinance, we needed to establish the actual office, to get staff and to be able to actually function as a professional organization. And so when I came on board, that was the goal, that was the mission. We've gotten it off, we secured an office space that took a significant amount of time. I was originally working with Demo Roberts of Public Property when I first came on board. And we had to wait, as you know, there's a lot of city process, and so we had to wait to see if there's any city property available. We had permission to look for property when there was no city property that could be used for our office. Then we had to go to the Board of Contract and Supply, do a bidding process. No bids were received, so it had to go 3 times, and when no bids were received, then we had to go through a process of securing outside of the bid. Then when we finally secured a space, it took months to get the funding to actually furnish the space. So that we had an agreement. We eventually got it signed, and we had the space renovated, but we had no office furniture, no equipment. And we had to wait for that process to clear to get us funding to do that. And approved. We did accomplish that, so we have a funding space. We hired a first staff member that joined us at the beginning of this fiscal year. It was a confidential assistant to assist with the processing of cases. We're in the middle of hiring an investigator. We've already conducted interviews. We're waiting to do a couple more. I've been working with the IT department to secure a case management system. So that went out to bid, and the bid opened in November. And we have upcoming in December, we've got 3 companies that we're going to be doing demos with to do a case management system, which Para has not had. And that was also kind of a lengthy process because we had to go with the IT to see whatever software that the city already had in its possession, if any of those needs, rule them out, then go to bid, go through the bid process. So we're in the process of getting that accomplished. We've had an open house. We're at the point where we're also fielding complaints and trying to resolve the complaints that we can without full staff. So I've been working with the police department and referring complaints to them as well, because we work with their internal affairs department. And so the way the process goes, we can receive complaints of misconduct, but Para does not have the authority to enforce any kind of discipline. So even if we review a complaint to completion, the process then is that we then inform the police department of our findings. We inform the council and the mayor's office. And then the police department has to respond to those findings, and they can either accept the board's recommendation for discipline if there's a sustained finding, or they can go in another path, but they have to provide back to Para, the mayor's office, and the council in writing why they deviated. You know, what was the discipline that they chose to impose. We've had some, I won't say setbacks, but delays in getting that accomplished, because it requires by ordinance formation of a disciplinary matrix, which is a document that the police department and Para agree is a reasonable matrix of discipline relative to the level of offense. And so we've submitted that to the police department with the last chief, and then with the new chief as well. We've had conversations about getting that document approved. They've forwarded it to legal, and we're still waiting for them to actually agree to that document.
May I just interrupt for a minute so I'm clear? So you cannot process these complaints until you have this disciplinary matrix agreed to?
Well, we can't provide a recommendation based on it, which the board then requires. So the disciplinary matrix, so for example, low level offense of maybe discourtesy. And the matrix could say, well, low level offense of discourtesy, the range of discipline that you can recommend would be from verbal reprimand to maybe training, right? Retraining. And then the board would make that recommendation to the police department. And the reason the matrix is important, beyond it just being in the ordinance itself as a requirement, is that it's supposed to be a range of outcomes that's already pre-agreed upon as reasonable by the police department. So that they can't then reject the recommendation of the board by saying, you're recommending an unreasonable disciplinary outcome based on the offense. Because the document that the board would be referring to would be one that the police department had vetted and agreed to previously. So we're trying to avoid a situation where the chief says, well, we're not gonna suspend that officer for that offense because we wouldn't suspend them if it was our investigation. We would only do a verbal reprimand. We would only be making recommendations in accordance with that matrix that they had been part of the process of creating.
So my follow-up question, I'm sorry, and if anyone else would like to interrupt, please do. So the complaints that we've been handling and taking, can you get them up until the point that you have to decide on what happens with the discipline? Because I'm interested in knowing, I know how much you work to get this organization together and get your space and all that in place, but what has been happening with the number of complaints? How many complaints have you been handling? You know, there's a certain number, I want to know exactly how many you have been operating without the matrix. And have you been taking complaints and how many?
Yeah, so this year we have 20 so far. There were 20 complaints this year. And I just also kind of add to that we haven't been soliciting or advertising for people to come make complaints. These are people that are organically finding it online and coming to us and making complaints. And part of the reason we haven't given a full press to advertise our existence, to solicit complaints, because we don't want people trying to cross the bridge that isn't built yet. We want to have investigators, we want to have the staff in place to provide quality service. The issue has been with para in the past, that it hasn't functioned to the point where it's provided a useful service to the public because it hasn't been organized in a way to do so. It hasn't been set up for success. And that was one of my initial concerns and goals driving the plan of action going forward, is to build the organization to create it so that we can provide a useful service when we start having people become users. You don't open up a restaurant and not have food in it. When people come to have and make orders, you can't give them anything. They very quickly lose faith in your ability to actually provide the service that you're supposed to provide. And even despite us not looking for people, we're getting those complaints anyway. And so what we do is we explain to the people what we can do. So a lot of them, I'll say, we do an intake process where we get the initial complaint, we speak to the complainant, we gather as much information that they have to vet whether or not there's enough to go forward to determine. So in the initial intake, is there enough here to warrant further investigation, or is it sufficiently clear that there is not an actual allegation of misconduct, and we use a preponderance of the evidence standard. And so we look at when we have cases that meet the standard going forward, they either have to be referred to the police department, internal affairs department at this juncture for them to do an investigation, or they're held pending the hiring of our investigator so that we can actually complete the investigation. And so I've met and I've been in close contact with the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Chief's office, because I want to be very clear, the PARA is not a adversarial agency to the police department. It's meant to be a cooperative, collaborative agency with the hopes of improving police services and increasing transparency, and also providing an alternative avenue for citizens who wouldn't be comfortable going to the police department to make a complaint, to have someplace that they can be heard and make the complaint in a safe environment. And because we're not affiliated with the police department. But despite our lack of affiliation, there is still an earnest desire for collaboration, because we're not suggesting that the police department can't do their investigations and that they're untrustworthy. That's not the point of PARA. The point of PARA is to provide an external review of those complaints and of those investigations to ensure that they are adhering to their own policies, that they are doing the things that they say they're doing, and that people are getting their due when they complain. And we've had mixed outcomes on some of our investigations. I can say that on some of the things that we have reviewed, completed investigations, the board has not found that the discipline recommended by the police department was sufficient or even in line with their their own guidelines. Being too little as opposed to, adequate discipline. One of the problems with the internal police investigation process is that they don't publish what the outcome of the disciplines. So they might say that there was a sustained complaint, but that's all the complainant gets, and that's all. That the complaint was sustained against the officer, but as far as what happened, there is no further information. So, we've had an incident that we looked at. That was a fairly significant incident. I'm not going to give the details here for obvious reasons, but just in general, according to the matrix that was provided, and it's not made up out of thin air, we used models from other communities and established oversight agencies. The instance that we looked at, that the police department themselves sustained a complaint of misconduct against one of their officers. The range of discipline should have been, according to policy, a suspension up until including possible termination, and the officer received a verbal reprimand. And so these are the kinds of things that will only get the light of day and only be addressed if you have an outside agency looking at that, reviewing it, and then working. Again, it's not to like throw the police under the bus and by any means, but it's to hold them accountable and say, hey, this is something that, you have to be consistent in your application of discipline and accountability, because that's what creates credibility in the community. That's really, I think, where one of the biggest uses that parent can be in the future is providing that transparency, being that nexus to having those conversations and holding them accountable in the public side. Because when the board finds that these things happen, what we are able to do is let you know by sending you the hearing results. We find them in fact. It gets sent to the police department, and it gets sent to you, and it will also get sent to the mayor's office. And so you'll be fully aware of these issues. And even though the police department is still within their purview to address it by imposing discipline, they have to be accountable for not imposing discipline by responding as to why they're not and letting you know, and that creates public pressure. That hasn't been happening. So this is one of the reasons why getting the ordinance addressed is a huge thing for us to be able to move forward and be more effective. We've also made many policy recommendations, which is part of our ordinance mandate. To the police department in writing, we sent those copies of those recommendations to the council and to the mayor's office as well as the chief, and haven't received responses on any of those policy recommendations. Not even an acknowledgement of receiving them, and that we're, they're declining to make the changes, or they've made some changes or whatever. And so language is put into the ordinance amendment proposal to create a timeline for them to do that, because the ordinance is silent as to like a timeline. So they're not technically in violation of the ordinance by not responding right away, but that's a problem, right? Because if they just stay silent for a long period of time, what's a reasonable period of time to give us a response on, changing the policy? And Para looks at policies from a holistic point and from a community perspective. The police department looks at policies from what's best for policing perspective. So when they're accredited, I did accreditation with my former agency. Accreditation is about what's the most effective police practice that's used across the country for police. It doesn't take into account what's the best for the community and the stakeholders and the people that are impacted by this policy. So like a quick example of that would be, juvenile detention cases, right? The policy says that if a juvenile is taken into custody, they don't have to be given access to a parent, guardian, or attorney unless they're being questioned, right? So they can't be questioned without one of those people present. So the policy states that clearly, and that's what the law is, and that's fair. But what it doesn't take into consideration is if you arrest a juvenile and you put them in juvenile holding, and they're there for an hour or 2 or 3, and they're traumatized by the interaction, and they want to talk to mom or dad or attorney, even if they're not being questioned, the police have the right to decline and deny the access. And that's in their policy, so they wouldn't be in violation of the policy without complaints about things of that nature. So one of the recommendations we've made is change the policy to require them to give access regardless of whether they're questioning the juvenile or not, right? That's more trauma-informed approach to dealing with juveniles. And so that's one of the recommendations the board made, to alter that policy from a sense of not impeding police practice, but improving police practice from a community standpoint that still doesn't hinder their ability to do their job. It just makes their interactions with the public better. And an outcome of that would also increase trust and increase credibility with the community. So it's really a win-win. So these are the kinds of things we're trying.
I'm gonna just hold you there for a minute and recognize Councilor Anderbaugh. Thank you, Councilor Sanchez.
And I just have, well, one, thank you for all you've shared so far and for being here tonight. A quick question I have is, you're talking about policy recommendations. Does Para and you in particular, do you just make city level policy recommendations? Or I'm wondering also how this all interacts with the state level law enforcement officers bill of rights, which, to be clear, because it's a flawed piece of policy, so I'll just say that up front, but would love, have you guys made recommendations that's for state level policy changes? Because it seems like this kind of hits right up against those state restrictions, and how could we, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have any jurisdiction to make policy recommendation on the state level, and in policing in general, it's all broken down by municipality. So even on a state level, if you were trying to address state level police action, you'd be able to address the state police, right? Their policies, but their policies don't impact local police departments.
But doesn't Leobor affect what we can do, like,
So-
discipline wise for city police?
Well, so Leobor is legislation that, gives them an extra layer of protection in any kind of discipline over a 2-day suspension, right? They have the right to request a Leobor hearing. We don't run afoul of Leobor in any way, because we're in an advisory board that doesn't impose discipline. The police department has to impose a discipline, and they're always gonna run against Leobor, and that's an issue. For the record, if you didn't ask, but I'll tell you, I agree that Leobor is extremely problematic, and I'll go further, and I think it should be repealed. That's coming from a former police officer. I don't think they need those extra protections. I don't think it's their purpose anymore. But we don't impact and make recommendations about Leobor, and we also don't impact, our decisions don't have like Leobor consequences.
Okay.
So there's no issue like what we do and having a conflict or having an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, I don't want to get like super specific. Thank you for what you've said so far. What was the policy that you were talking about right before?
Like juvenile detention policy?
Yeah, can you explain that again? Because I think I've heard some concerns around that.
Yeah, so the policy, I don't have the words in front of me, the exact words, but the gist of it is that it allows police to take juveniles into custody, right? So you suspect a juvenile committing a crime, right? And you arrest them. Well, they have certain protections that are for the juveniles. And you cannot, when an adult gets arrested, the police can ask them questions, you give them the Miranda beforehand, and they have the right to waive counsel and they can answer questions. And that's the normal standard for adults. With children, they can't do that without either a parent, guardian, or an attorney present, right? But they don't have to provide access to the juvenile if they're not questioning them. So what that means is that if, I was 15 and I got into a fight in high school and I get arrested for the fight, which back in the day, we didn't arrest kids for having fights in high school. So that's a different story altogether. But now they often do. So they get arrested and get brought back to the station. Well, they get put in a cell, waiting when they get processed. And maybe it takes a while for someone to come pick them up. Or someone comes right away to the police station and says, hey, I want to talk to John that got arrested by his mom, and they say, well, you have to wait until we're done with it. You don't get access, you don't get to see him. And so they can process, they can let him sit until they choose to release him every time they release him. And there's also a side to that. There wasn't language in there that required them to immediately notify. the parents of the arrest. Right, so that was something we also made a recommendation of put language in there that required them to immediately notify a parent or guardian of the arrest of the juvenile. So that's the kind of thing that if they were gonna question with Johnny, hey, we wanna talk to you about the fight, you know, what, they can't do that, right? And if they did, anything that was elicited would be suppressed later on because you can't do that. But if they did, then they would have to grant access to the attorney, parent, whatever, to actually do the question. But if they're not questioning, because they're not interested in information to corroborate or look to implicate that person in the crime that they suspect them of, then they don't have to provide access until they're ready. And so that could be traumatic for the kid, right? You have a kid that's locked up in a cell. They have to be kept separated from adults. There's juvenile holding facilities. Those are federal guidelines. But it doesn't take into account. And the reason I bring that up is just, it's a very like kind of easy cut and dry thing to understand, is that you can make policy recommendations that are to the benefit of the community that are not to the detriment of the police department. There is absolutely zero negative impact about that change in the policy and the police's ability to do their job effectively and to do their investigation effectively. There's no negative impact, right? So those are simple policy recommendations that should be implemented fairly quickly. But even those we haven't received responses on, and that's one of the things we're just trying to build a relationship and credibility, but we also need the ability to kind of force them to respond through ordinance. And that's one of the things we're doing.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So,
It's, if you want to think about it.
no, it's a question for our city solicitor, Eddie. Is the police department the only, are they the ones that like do their own policies, or like can the mayor or the council change policies for the police department?
So I understand that the chief of police is an appointed department director, so to the extent that that would fall under, when Courtney's not here anymore, that there would be some type of direction from the mayor's office, but I believe it's going to be internally, but I'd be happy to look into that further and actually speak with there's a separate solicitor that staffs para, Attorney Barker, and I can contact with that attorney if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more?
Were you gonna continue with going, or is it?
No, I
open
think
for
if you have
questions?
questions, it's better. Well, these lawyers can talk all night, you know. Don't want to do.
Just for clarification, so I'm clear, okay. So your intake on your 20 complaints that you had this year, and how many did you have last year?
I think we had 15 to 18, the numbers in between there, new complaints.
And are most of them dismissed or?
Most of them are dismissed.
Okay, and can we just go through that process one more time? So you do the intake, you gather the information to that, then you figure out if there's enough there, and you use a preponderance of the evidence standard.
Right, so yeah, it's very low. So for the intake, that's for the outlet, that's for hearings.
Oh.
For the intake, it's even lower.
Okay,
For the intake, we're looking at, is there a reasonable complaint? It's more like a reasonable suspicion, probable cause standard. It's very low. Is it likely that this allegation happened? And the reason that so many of them are easily dismissed is because body cam footage, right? So we're able to, on the intake process, now we'll get a complaint that says the police officer used foul language on the car stop and called me names and used racist slurs. Then I look at the body cam footage and the entire stop is caught on video, and the officer is 100% professional, didn't use any profanity. And that happens, right? People are upset, they got a ticket, their perception of the changes over time, they make a complaint. And so when we have a clear cut case where there isn't any substance to the complaint, we're able to dismiss that. We've had complaints where, you know, people allege that people on the parent board are bugging their homes, right? You know, so those are pretty easy to dismiss. But then we also have complaints of, we've had two recent illegal arrests, and those are pending. The police department reviewed them. One was sustained, one was dismissed by the police department. They both had enough merit in our case to go to full investigation, so those are held pending full investigation on our end.
when you get your investigator.
Right.
Okay. And then, that's very helpful to know what your process is. And then do you notify the complainant, the person who that's filed the complaint? I mean, do you always notify them of what the outcome is?
We do, and one of the things that we're working with this case management system is to automate that process. So one of the things that is a requirement is we ask for a public portal that simplifies the process of not only making the complaint, but it also will allow them to make compliments, because again, we're not trying to just look for the bad. We want to also build up the people that are doing a great job and hold them as examples, because we think that that's useful for the police department to recognize the good actors and to hold the bad actors accountable. But so this public portal allows them to more easily submit not only the complaint, and to generate an automated case number for us and make the process more automated and streamlined, but they can submit any video that they have themselves, any kind of data, any files. And then every step of the way in our process, when the complaint gets upgraded, so it gets assigned to an investigator, the system will automatically let the complainant know the status change. So it won't just be the outcome, it'll be every time that changes, they'll get an update notification of what's happening, which is a much more robust way to communicate with the complainants.
So the three things you're waiting for to complete your bridge, that's what you
Yeah.
refer to it, you know, a
The Rainbow Bridge.
You can deliver a service that we expect under the PARA ordinance. The matrix, the case management software, and the investigator, those are the three things.
The ordinance, so the ordinance pieces.
Right, well, the ordinance, you know, I'm just gonna say, let me just ask you, because this is the finance committee, not the ordinance committee. If you are not successful in obtaining the amendment to the ordinance, I don't know, because I haven't been involved with that at all.
Sure.
Can you do your job?
Yeah, it's more difficult, because, so I'll put it to you this way, the access to information piece is critical. And so what we would be forced to continue to do is to ask the police department to provide us with records. And, you know, last anecdote to tell you, to just, I think, hammer home why that's problematic. We had a case recently that I think was pretty well known in the council, was like had a lot of public interest, where an individual with mental health concerns was detained and then eventually released, but he was physically roughed up during the detention, and we got a complaint. We went through the process of trying to review that complaint, and I did my normal process of asking for documents and videos and everything, and I got a police report with one narrative, and I got one body cam footage. And so when I did my intake, I reviewed that video. It was a video that had been, it was the responding officer, and the cam had been knocked off and was on the floor. So you were seeing just a video of the sky with leaves on it, and you could hear what was going on, and you could eventually, when they crossed the plane, you could see what was going on. But there was about 10 officers on the scene. And so I contacted the police department after watching the video, and you know, I'll say this again, I have a very good relationship with the major at the OPR and all that. And I think they do an excellent job, and I have a lot of respect for them, but this is just one of these, it's an administrative thing, right? That they think they're compliant and they send information over that they think is going to be useful to us, but that's not how oversight is done. So, you know, my comment was, hey, thanks for the information. Were the other 9 officers on scene in violation of the body cam policy, or do you have 9 other videos? And he's like, oh, I'll talk to the guys and see if they can send me that stuff over. And so then I wait another couple of weeks to get a couple of additional videos, but not all of them. And so, you know, if I am bringing that to the board, and then the board does a hearing after we've done an investigation, and we prepare a report for you, the council. I can't say this information is based on a review of all of the police reports. I can only swear to you that this information is based on the review, all the reports they do, all the information they gave, which is very different.
Yeah.
So oversight really does require at minimum, the ability to access the information to review it. Recently had an issue with just getting the outcome of what we refer. So one of the big contentions between Para in the past and still, as an issue for the PD has been, well, are you going to do investigations that we're all doing? Are we going to run concurrent investigations that interfere with each other? And I said to them, no, we have no interest in doing concurrent investigation that interferes with your investigation. You have the enforcement ability. If you do an investigation that could even potentially result in criminal charges, we want no part of interfering with that. We're going to let you do your thing. We have the ability to hold in abeyance our complaints. It may result in whatever, example, there was 2 cases recently that the police department recommended termination. What are we going to recommend that's greater than that? It's nothing. So once they concluded their case and that was we could close our case out. It's been handled and there's nothing the board could say that it's going to be somehow more impactful. But in cases where they do conclude, but there isn't a termination, so no one knows what the outcome is. They don't even refer back to us and tell us what the outcome of their internal complaint process is. And so we recently, had a discussion at a meeting with the administration again and said, hey, you have to give us this information. What sense does it make that we refer cases to you that we receive? You investigate them, and then you just tell us we got it, it's all done. And we're not going to tell you what happened. And it just doesn't make any sense, right? I just want common sense there. And so requiring them is, I think, more effective than asking for it. And it's been asked for a long time, and it hasn't fully been applied.
I get it. All right, I'm gonna let Councilor Harris.
Yeah, I have several questions, Councilwoman Andrew sort of jump started one of them, but I'm gonna start with number 1, which is, I know you're desiring to change the ordinance. I know that because Councilman Espinola and I were at one point at the table working with you.
Right.
Then we had, the changeover for our new administration to come aboard, and everything just stopped at that point. We didn't hear any more from her. So my question, I'm going to start out with the question that I have, if you don't mind. Have you seen the lawsuit that was brought against Power by the Fraternal Order of Police? That was his name was Darryl Wyatt, who filed a complaint before Power Board. And then the Fraternal Order of Police filed a lawsuit against Power and took Power to court, saying that Power cannot operate based on the consent decree. And that was back and forth in court. But Judge Fortunato, who read the Power ordinance and seen that a part of that ordinance did not put Power in the same category as the police, right? It's a civilian oversight. It's not a police oversight. It doesn't have the same law, the requirements police have, right? And so what was really, I think, in being in court and watching this whole thing unfold was the fact that that third entity that between Para and the police department was the city council. And because the city council was given the subpoena power in the ordinance to be able to respect the executive director when he come with his proof that he needed really to have the subpoena power. That right there was where the judge said, I don't see any reason how that affect, and I'm really blessed with a really good memory. I thank God for that, really, because a lot of people can't remember anything. That's because I write everything down, and I've been doing it for over 30 years, right? Everything gets written down. And so I do remember the police, and you can look this up because it should be public records so you can find that. I remember saying because of the fact, the way power was built, that it did not interfere, it can operate according, along with the consent decree. And so that ruling sent power out of the police department, or, I mean, I'm sorry, out of the courts with a drive to move forward with, you know, trying to bring these complaints, especially to the public, complaints that the public is filing, try to bring it in a way that it served the people who created it. Power was not created, I don't know whether you know this or not, power was not created by a political body. It was not created by the politicians. It was created by community. And it was created by the people who felt, okay, this is a way we can be able to be oversight, just basically oversight. First of all, when power was created and the matrix was put together, police bill of rights was definitely one of the biggest pieces that prohibited you from being able to fire anybody or even recommend firing, because even the chief himself could not take that action without a person, you got a police officer, without their bill of rights, right? And so that had been all along the issue with some of these major major crime events that we conduct against the public, and it has been one of the major things that have been the problem from the very beginning, the matrix itself. And the matrix is only built on the fact that the police can only go so far. And so my question around the matrix, because I'm gonna go to the matrix and then I'll go back to the police bill of rights. But I'm gonna go to the matrix because you said that you had started to work with the police on really changing the matrix or looking at the matrix from the way policing are policing nowadays. You're changing it, you're saying you're working to do that?
We didn't change it, we just we sent them a copy of the matrix as it was.
Oh,
With an
okay.
attempt to approve it, just to get the current chief to agree with it.
Oh, okay, I got you.
So that
I thought you
so
said,
that we
okay.
can- so that we can utilize it as a guide.
Okay. So you sent it to our new chief that
Oh,
we
yeah,
have.
they've had it for quite some.
Okay, yeah, I need to know that because, I don't understand why they are not, responding. But I do know one thing, that, some of the requests of the amendments, we would have to go back and look at that lawsuit and see whether we would be setting ourselves up for another lawsuit from the Fraternal Order of Police.
Yeah, so can I comment on this?
Sure, absolutely, please do. And
So I think that you can't prevent a lawsuit from happening, right? If they wanna sue, anybody can sue anybody for anything, but there is no liability issue. And one of the key things we did not ask for a change in ordinance to prevent any of these issues from being ripe for argument is that there is no request to create disciplinary enforcement. That's the key piece. Para is an advisory. And so you don't, all that change, giving access to records just creates the ability for transparency, I think, to do an actually thorough examination of the record and not one that is just provided you by the police department. Here's what we want you to look at. We don't want you to look at this, and you'll never know that it exists if we don't provide it. That's a problem for any kind of oversight. And oversight is not unique to Providence. It's unique to Providence and Rhode Island because there isn't any civilian oversight in the rest of the state yet. And hopefully we can be a model of effective oversight that will then spark at least a discussion on the state level. But there are tons of oversight agencies across all the country, all its different cities that vary greatly in the authority that they have, but things specifically have. Any of those changes requested were designed especially not to create the issue that you're concerned about, because it doesn't change the nature and the body from an advisory board. All it does is it gives access to the information so that the advisory board can get informed opinions. What you're getting now, if anything, would be not fully informed opinions, it'd be opinions based on some of the information, not necessarily all of the information. And even in the sense of going to you for a subpoena, and we've eliminated the desire to take, subpoena power stays with the council, it makes sense, it would hopefully only be needed to request the presence of people at hearings, because if we had access to the records, we're gonna need that for access. But even with a subpoena, there's no guarantee that you've been turned over all the documents, because it's the same issue. The issue is now another body is compelling you to turn over documents. Please turn over the documents. And you know this in legal practice as well. I mean, there's many instances of subpoenas not being fully complied with. And you don't find that out unless somebody whistleblowers or it somehow gets leaked later that there was a document they chose not to turn over. So really, it stays an advisory board. Everything is essentially the same from a functional standpoint, except the access to records piece, which is critical, allows us to say to you when we do make a decision and do give you an opinion on finding a hat, that we know because we have access to the same records system, that those are the records that exist in the system. And we would be adhering and compelled to abide by the same policies that the police department does in terms of safeguarding those records and release of those records. This conversation has come up because the prior director released information that they weren't supposed to, and that was one of the arguments that the police department brought up and said, well, how can we trust getting access to records because it was released inappropriately? And so my retort to that is a simple one. If that's the way that we operate, that person is held accountable and they were terminated, right? So, and if that's the underlying philosophy, then anytime a police officer messes up and is held accountable, then the public should, I guess, not trust any of the police department because someone made a mistake. And what about when an officer makes a mistake and isn't held accountable, which happens quite frequently? I guess the public shouldn't trust the entire police department because of the actions of one person. So, I mean, it's a straw man argument. It doesn't really hold up because the individual or organization prior that made that mistake was actually held accountable. So it shouldn't taint the organization as a whole. And the organization is designed to be an oversight body. You can't do oversight without looking at it.
I have one more question, and it's not about the matrix.
Sure.
Thank you for explaining. My question is, related to the policy recommendations that you have sent to the council. How many have you sent to the council since you've been?
I think we have six different policies that we've recommended changes to them.
Where did you send it? To the clerk's office?
The communication went to the entire council, the council president, the mayor's office, the mayor's chief of staff, and the police department's chief. I can forward this.
I was getting ready to say, I have never seen them.
Okay.
That is also a part of the ordinance that we take in consideration as policies.
They were
Recommendation.
Yeah,
And that is a part of the ordinance that you have right now that has not been amended, has not been changed, but that's what the operation is. I believe that a lot of the concerns is that there is sort of a list of to do that is also inside of the ordinance itself. One is community engagement. I feel very, very strong about the fact that community needs to have access to what is happening with our community. Has to have public trust. The public has to trust para, and public has to know. I understand that you've been through some things, you hadn't had an office, and I understand all of that. But I cannot for the life of me understand why haven't para been out in the community, even with the changes that are proposed, because I think the changes make more sense to go before the people who created power and say, look, this is what's hindering us, and this is what's gonna make us more powerful than the council itself or the police. I really do. So I'm a little bit curious about what have you been doing to engage the community? What is your marketing? What, I mean, you said that you didn't want to open up the floodgate when something is not already built. But the fact is, para to some people don't exist. And like you said, the only way people find out about it, because when you're in a state of emergency and something has happened to you, you look for help in the best you can. And most likely people like go to para before you go to the police department. These are the people that abuse you, so go to para. And word of mouth, most likely, is how those complaints have reached you. But in spite of it reaching you, even by word of mouth, there is such a disconnection from the community. How I know, they constantly tell me that. And I'm glad we're having this discussion tonight, and I'm glad we're here. I mean, this is not a perfect space, especially having the public, you know, also join us in this meeting, but I'm glad. Because a lot of these things that's happening, I think it could have been prohibited from happening if we'd have had even more transparency from PAC.
Okay, so.
I mean, you've already said that you.
I don't know what you mean by, if you can just say what transparency that you're referring to as far as from PAC.
First of all, you're saying that your relationship or that strained relationship or aligning with the police department has been really difficult for Power to get its job done. You can't get complaints or any of that stuff. A lot of that negotiation actually started down in the mayor's office where the police sit and see Power at one time when was dormant, it was not existent. Somebody plus city council what he did was dismantle it for the purpose of what we're going to tonight. You know, people were saying, I'm not pleased with Para, you know, we're going to Para and it's nothing real, our complaints are not really being heard, or we don't feel comfortable with Para, whatever. So the city council, former city council, God bless his soul, he's dead now, but he dismantled Power because he had a deep investment in Power as well. For the sake of never disfunded it, never took the funding away, but was for the purpose of Power reinventing itself, or Power really becoming what the people needed it to be. So this second wave of when we had the last executive director and the city council, the body here starting it up again. To not this particular body, but some people from this body were part of it, to start it up again, right? And with that, it was the intention that all of these things that are sort of being done can be brought out in the open, because a lot of that conversation actually were brought from the community itself, and the police had to sit with us and say exactly what this relationship would look like, you know what I mean? And there was an agreement that Power could operate, you know what I mean, without any problems or whatsoever. So my curiosity in some of the policies changes that you have made for the police, for the police department, right? I'm curious to some of those things, whether they are written into the changes the policy changes that you were asking for the police department. A recommending of the changes that need to be made for police. Those are the policies that Para was supposed to be acting for, was recommendations that the police could do a little better.
Yeah, that's what we.
That's what you said to us.
Yeah, that's what we said, yeah. I mean, so we've recently sent 2 different communications, each to the police department, the council, and the mayor's office, with recommendations to make those types of changes to police policy, for 6 different policies. The board has reviewed 6 different policies and made those types of recommendations to improve the policy for the party. And I just want to go back to the transparency piece and reaching out to the community. We recently had a open house. We invited the public to come, we advertised it, we sent invitations to the council, to all of the, to leaders in the community. We sent well over 100 invites out to the public. We had a pretty well attended, open house to reintroduce, to show where the new office is, to let people know what we're doing. We've had a lot of community members show up. We had some great conversations there. And the reason it's taken a while to do that is, and I just want to address that piece because it is, you're 100% right. It's critical to be engaged in the community and do that outreach, but to do it prematurely is counterproductive as well. By going out to the community and saying, hey, come to Para, and then Para isn't situated to actually provide a service, it's jumping the gun a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why holding off on the open house and getting in the community to re-advertise the resurgence of Para. I mean, we've had this conversation in the past, and I believe you made the comment to me, this is the third strike, right? We gotta get it right. And I 100% agree with you. And it's extremely important to me to get it right because they don't want it to fail. I think that the service it has the potential of providing is really instrumental in giving that transparency to the public that it deserves when it comes to accountability for the police. But beyond that, which is an important piece, I think one of the greatest assets Para has is giving the community a voice when it comes to addressing those policy issues. The public can't walk into the police department and say, hey, I think we should change this policy. But they can come to Para and say, we've had this issue with the police department. Counselors can come to Para. People can say, hey, this is something that's coming up. It doesn't have to just be a member of the community or our own internal review. Anybody who's a stakeholder can bring it to our attention if there's an issue with policy or whatever. And we actually can be that nexus to review it and then provide a recommendation that the police department then has to respond to. So Joe Blow off the street can't do that. They can't walk into the PD and say, we recommend you change this policy, and they're required to look at it and review it. I mean, so that's an extremely powerful tool and feedback that we have to utilize that could be a real great asset to the community. Because looking at the policies from a community viewpoint standpoint and making those recommendations for changes is really crucial. Everything else is absolutely helpful. But again, it's advisory. I think the real key is the transparency. So if we look at, and Officer Harris did XYZ and the police department did nothing about it, Para can't change what they can do about it. Para can certainly let you all know that nothing was done about it. And then the public would know about it. And then you pile 3 or 4 or 5 of those cases in the view of the public, you put shine a light on that. And then there's pressure on the administration to make a change, to do something. And have the police department answer for those issues. And I just want to clarify one point. We don't have a strained relationship with the police department. And I certainly don't have a strained relationship with anyone in the police department. And if I said that or implied that, I apologize for the miscommunication. What is strained is the adherence to the ordinance is written and getting the information in a timely manner and all of the information. That doesn't strain our relationship. It just creates a problem with having to go back multiple times to say, can you send me more? I see that there's info here that you haven't shared. Can you send me this information? So the relationship's good, but that's separate and apart from getting full compliance with the things that the ordinance asks us to do. And I haven't even touched on the Community Police Relations Act of the ordinance that requires Para to do a number of things that we need to be empowered to do. And we've made progress. Like the gang list review is something that we've been doing under that requirement under section 4 of the ordinance, the CCPRA. And I've met with the solicitor's office and the police chief, and we finally got them to go forward with getting outside counsel to do an audit of their gang list, which is an annual audit. That hasn't been done in probably decades, right? And so that's happening, and that's through constant pushing on our part to make it happen. So, we are making progress in some of those areas. We've had a good relationship and some good trust being built, and they understand we're not out to get anybody. But really, the key piece to oversight, if that's what the city wants, if that's what the community wants, which I think they do, and it makes sense, and that's what the ordinance that you guys passed originally tasks parents, but doesn't give them the access and information to actually affect it. And that's really what it's about, you know, and I think we can definitely get there. It just, you know, we're taking those steps, but it would make huge progress in a relationship and reaching out to the community. And the last thing I'll say about the community piece is, you know, I have a couple of things that we've already envisioned that we want to implement that I think will be great. There's a mediation program I'd like to start, where a lot of these low-level complaints can be resolved through mediation and informal process. And I'd like to have the mediators come from the community, you know, community leaders, people from the community themselves, where we provide a mediation training through CRMCI. I've been through that mediation training. It's great facilitative mediation training. They agree to be on a volunteer list. And then I've talked about it with the PD, and they verbally like the idea because they know that it's an opportunity to create a bad situation into a positive by getting those parties together to informally resolve the issue. And the complainant has an opportunity to let the police officer know, I felt disrespected when you did X, Y, and Z. The officer can explain what was going on. And then instead of a complaint, they can walk away with a handshake. That's got huge potential for improving the relationship between the public and the police department. And we can facilitate that and use members of the community to be the mediators, which is huge because they get to be a part of that process. And in return, they get, you know, pretty good training in being mediators and have that experience, which I think is good for everybody. So that's another piece. I'd like for us to do workshops and clinics to tell people, this is what you should do on a vehicle stop. Here's what your First and Fourth Amendment rights are. Here are things to educate the public on not only positive interactions with the police, setting them up for success in encounters, but also understanding their rights from a layperson's perspective, that we can provide that information. You know, we can do pamphlets, we can do a lot of stuff. We can spend the money on doing that. But, you know, shame on me, I'm being fiscally responsible. We want to make sure that we're doing the required necessary tasks first to be functional, to give them something useful. And, you know, for Para to go out and hold lessons on what to do before we've actually provided really useful service seems just a little bit backwards. We want to gain the trust of people by giving them something that they can use. And that's our goal.
One more question, and I sort of I don't agree. I don't agree with you. First of all, if the public doesn't trust Para, you can build a mansion. You can take that Superman building and make it into the most gorgeous castle there is. That doesn't mean people are gonna live there, right? Or come to the place, right? I feel like what you have been doing, especially around the gang database, that is very important to the public. In fact, the partners, the Providence, whatever the title name with the Providence community, whatever relation, whatever that big long name, used to be called the CSA. And at that point, CSA came with the young people who were being targeted for the gang database. They came and they wanted to make sure that that was a part of it when we revived Para, that was a part. That meant a lot to a lot of young people who are feeling that they are still being targeted for that gang database. I hear a lot of that. The mediation part we were talking about, and being able to involve community. That's a good piece. Talking about workshops. You don't have to talk about the fact, and you can be honest and transparent with people that Para may not be ready for complaints, or Para may not be doing complaints, but it's very, very important that you don't go this long gap of time and then expect people to come. That's something I get a little edgy about, because Providence have a habit, I'll build when they'll come. No, it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? You have to be specific, driven to make sure that people are understanding. The people who's gonna be using that power board, using you guys are the public, not the police. There might be some police wives that may come and file a complaint, and a lot of that has happened in the past. Where they got sick and tired of being brutalized at home, so they utilize some other avenue. Now, I'm just saying this, I'm a little frustrated because I do know that the community itself is so different from power. I have a letter that I can read, but I'm not because it's getting late and we've been here. I haven't eaten, I don't know how many people I haven't eaten. So I won't add to this because this is not the space to do it. But each and every one of us, my new city council colleagues, more so than me, have tons of meetings. Where power could maybe appear in those meetings, go to the city council's meeting. You guys are more than happy to have someone explain about something, an initiative that's happening in the city that is for their benefit. You know what I mean? You don't have to say, okay, we are ready to open house. You're not ready for that. Maybe not. But you do have some things that you have been doing that you can talk about power, and power can no longer be like, I believe right now, if I said, I'm not doing this, by the way, saying that I don't think power should exist anymore. How many public members do you think would come out? Especially people who have filed complaints to this board to defend power. At the end of the day, it won't be the police, they're not gonna defend power, they're not. Politicians, we sort of like what's popular at the moment, you don't know. But it's a community-driven entity, and that's who should be really understanding what's going on with power. I don't think you waiting is helpful. I think you're building less trust. I've heard all kinds of stuff about power, how people have filed complaints and they did not get any response. They did not get, and I can actually have people write you if that's something you would like to hear from them directly.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Do this, right? That would be helpful.
Yeah, and saying that they don't know what happens with their complaints. So I'm really feeling really sort of frustrated because the community part is being left out. The part that's most important for that organization to exist is being left out. I know you're doing all these things and yes, go out and buy a fancy suit, yeah, buy this and that, and we'll be all right, but you know what? It doesn't work that way. You gotta make sure along the way you're bringing people along, especially the community who supposedly believe in this board, You're right, it is an alternative to going to the people that beat you up, you know what I mean? Or violate your rights or whatever the case may be. But they gotta have to know that power does exist. I understand that you've been through a lot, and I've seen that you've done a lot within a period of time to try to get to where you're going. But I'm very worried about the public being left out of this whole process. That's just my little 2 cents.
No, and I appreciate.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't mean to go.
I appreciate the feedback, and I would just say, I would like for us to be able to continue the conversation because your feedback is not only appreciated, but it's important. We've met many times in the past, to talk about things, to try to move things forward. I'm happy to live in your community meetings and to meet with you to.
All of them. I got 14 other council people that have more meetings than me. I'm busy.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, no, mine is like, people in my neighborhood knows about Paris, not as much as a lot other. I believe that if you divide up among all 15 of us, you at least have your, the transparency that's needed or the connection to the people.
Yeah, and that was one of the points behind the open house, was getting the public to come in and see where they can find us and what we're doing and have those conversations, which is why we had the open house, which is why we're starting those conversations, getting them involved. You know, I had a great conversation with Joe Buck, local legend about.
I ain't turn on you just like that. Tomorrow you'll be like,
Yeah, but but having those people come and get involved, and, we are doing that. We had, I think, pretty valid reasons for delaying it in terms of not being staffed, not having an office, not having the resources or the means to do that. And I respect your opinion on it, and I would love to continue the conversation. I really would. It's not in any way, shape, or form received in a negative way. Anything that people disagree or have different views and can make us better, we embrace that. We're here to serve the community, not just one way. I mean, if you have a way that you think can help us, make us better, I want to implement it, and we want to do it. So I appreciate it, and it's actually well received, not honest. So thank you for the feedback.
thank you, and thank you for bringing some of your concerns about the police policy changes that, most likely, as you know, we had a new, this is no excuse, but we had a new change in our staff, we have new changes brought about. Even when we had the old staff, I have never seen any of these policy reviews because I know that is a part of our charge. I would have led the charge in here. You guys are doing different things. You're working on environment stuff. Everybody else is doing all their little niche. Mine is public safety and housing, and I'm very passionate about that. And I will continue to work in areas like that and work with my colleagues to make sure that we all understand the same thing and on the same page. I really have a problem with the community engagement piece that is written right into the ordinance. I think that is the beginning of how the ordinance starts to talk about what power is about. And it seems like you built everything else, so that part is left out. And I have a concern about that. I'm very concerned. I'm concerned that the public will not come out and defend you in case something happens. And that's bad, because that's how the thing was worn. That's how it was brought back. The public brought it back, public revived it. And that's what they wanted, and they demanded it, to have it. It wasn't the police. So I'm just worried about that. That's the part that really bothers me.
Well, we want to show that up, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Of course, and so we have Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And thank you. This has been, I know, a long night. Quick, more logistical question, kind of building on where Councilwoman Harris just left off around some of the documents. I think she's accurate that but we do kind of divide and conquer with our expertises, but I read everything that comes to me very thoroughly, sometimes multiple times, and I don't remember ever seeing the documents you referenced around the policy, so I'm just kind of wondering where it was sent. Like, was it sent to the clerk, or was it a physical document? I feel bad that I haven't read it, and I would like to.
So we send an electronic and hard copy to the council president's office, CC to the council. It gets sent to the
And when you say
chief.
CC to the council, like what
Council,
email you're emailing,
Your official email.
like the ward 3 at providencera.gov, or like what it.
I'd have to look at it.
Because I imagine it's going to an old email address is what I'm wondering. Like, I think it might be going.
And then it also went to the e-copies and the hard copies go to the mayor's office, chief of staff, and the chief of police.
Okay.
So that's how it gets distributed.
Okay.
And I'm happy to forward.
We should make sure that we have the right contact info
Okay.
for all of us. Yeah, because I have all of the things forwarding to one email, and I don't think.
And can you resend that to us?
Maybe send it to the clerk who sends everything.
Yeah, to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you send it to the clerk's office, they get everything to us, like really.
We'll make sure to forward those copies to the clerk tomorrow.
Excellent, thank you.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just quickly, it seems like it's really important that we hired an investigator to do a lot of the functions. Why hasn't that been done up to this point?
Well, part of the reason was there was no facility to house any of these things. And so that was the initial holdup. Then there was a delay because there was a hiring freeze. Listen, and we had requested the ability to hire someone. But we were denied the ability because there was an issue with,
We're aware, yeah, of the hiring.
yes,
We-
so
it's just-
It was because of us.
It was a hiring freeze, and it was lifted, and so we've been collecting applications and have already conducted several interviews of some pretty good candidates. We have a couple more pending, we'll be hiring very soon.
Awesome. And I do want to apologize for not going to the open house. I was planning on it, but something came up last minute.
We'll have more, and you're welcome to stop at any time, and just call and wanna, we happy to have you.
Do you have parking for people? Because people don't come to the city because of parking. The people that need to come and see your office.
Yeah. Parking
It's
is,
usually the people that's already working and it's easy to get out of work and come to
Yeah.
something like that.
parking is clearly difficult in the city in general. I mean, there are several
That's why
parking lots. There are several parking lots. And that's why having the complaint process be really easy online is very helpful. So they don't have to come to make a complaint, but to come to the place there are multiple lots, but they are paid lots. We're on the bus line. We're right across the street from the Dorley building. So it's super centrally located and easy to get to. But yeah, parking in the city, I mean,
Yeah.
that's something I just don't have any unfortunate power to affect. I wish I could, but it's difficult.
I think we have one more question from Counselor Sanchez.
Just a couple, like 2, 3 quick things.
Limit mine, I cut everything down, I smashed everything.
Try to figure out how to make it one big one. When did the new facility start?
So
Or when did you move in there?
we got approved to go into that building in November. Well, I should say that we signed a lease, I think it was August, but the place wasn't actually fit. After they signed the lease, they had to do some work to configure the office to make it. They didn't knock a wall down and open the office up because it was 2 small offices that were being combined. So that was November of 22. And then we didn't get furnished until, we didn't get the purchase order approved to actually put office furniture and equipment in the building until May. Of 23, and that's when it actually, they ordered it. And then WB Mason installed it a couple months later. So we've only been in the office for functional for half a year.
Thank you. And just going back to some of the points that my colleague, Councilwoman Harris was making. I think the community piece is super critical. I think you really do need to have community buy-in. I think like she was saying, it is the true core of what para is through and through. I mean, that's the goal, is to have para be an active body way longer than any of us or yourself is serving the city of Providence. And for that to happen, it does need to have community buy-in. And just from my conversations with folks in the streets is after the firing of the previous executive director, and that's a whole other conversation on its own, a lot of trust or support from the community kind of diminished. And that's obviously not your fault, and way before you and before me. But that's something that we do need to make sure is a very critical component, and it's going to be a lot more than just going to community meetings. I think that just my unsolicited opinion or advice would be to hire a community liaison or community organizer to focus on this work. Because Director, I think you're very well principled and you have a lot of values, and I mean, I definitely have had conversations with you in the past, but that's kind of my other point is I think that you as the leader of para should try to develop stronger relationship with other counselors. I just say that because we're here trying to appoint you, and I don't think you reached out, at least to myself, prior to this, to have a conversation. And I'm definitely one of the more, I would say, active or try to be everywhere as much as possible. But I think that's something that needs to happen in the near future. It's on us counselors as well. I mean, we can reach out and learn more, but I mean, our minds and priorities, like you were saying, colleague, are all over the place. But I think that's something that's super important if we try to develop stronger relationships going forward. Because I agree with all the policy recommendations that I've heard. It is important to have critical, independent oversight on a body that's enforcing laws in our city. So I mean, those are really just my key points. I'm happy to chat off the record more with the ordinance, see exactly what we need to do to get that going forward. But that's really all I got.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I'm hungry now.
Yes.
Councilwoman, Madam Chair, I have to be very honest with what I'm feeling right now. I don't know what decision this body is gonna make about tonight, but I myself really would like to see some effort made on the behalf of the community having some type of something from PARA. Like my colleague said it so well, and that was a part of something I was gonna read. A lot of that distrust definitely happened from the last executive director, really. And it just left, and then all of a sudden there was no more interaction with the community other than the people who come and file the complaints before the board. And there was no other connection with community. So for me, I'm not, if it passes out of committee tonight, I don't know whether I'm in a position right now to vote on the floor. That's just me. And for me to say that after years and years and years and years of, even when there was no executive director, even when there was no oversight as a civilian, I called the council president and asked that every year until the day you've gotten here, that it be funded. That's what I get. I took it on myself. And then I had a chief of staff who realized that I would call them here, and then she would call me and say, you know, the finance meeting is going to be here in Power. So, you know what I mean? I've always had every, and it's not like we don't need it. We really need it more than ever now, especially with the uprising pot. We definitely need it more than ever. But right now, because I'm just having a problem with the problem of community engagement piece. That's where I'm at. So I just wanted to make that to you, clear to you, Madam Harris.
I just, I think, just let me ask any other questions, maybe we could discuss amongst ourselves as the committee members. Well, I may have one more question for you, but you know, it may be that we need to hear a more detailed, because there's no question that you've had a lot going on to build where you are. And I understand exactly your timing and how difficult it has been to put your office and your staff together. But I think you know, part of it is seeing that very important part is the community engagement. I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to give you a little bit of time to put a more detailed community engagement plan that you might share with us. So that we might understand, you know, let you have a little bit of time, and that we can hear from you again on the community engagement piece. Can you do that? Can you put that together?
I can do anything that you ask me. That's not a problem. The question is, are you talking about? So I mean, the only question I have is like, if this reappointment, my appointment expires at the end of this month, because you don't put me forward. And what does that mean procedurally for me going forward to do more on the community engagement or anything?
I can just run through that.
Oh, my gosh.
Sorry.
Sorry, now we have to wait for our solicitor to come back, so I don't want to look.
We're
around.
gonna be like, what?
Yes.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
And I totally, you know, I take the remarks to heart and I understand and it's difficult when you come in after something negative has happened. And you're trying to rebuild that trust, you know, not only did that the former director, you know, when they left, it also went without a director for over a year. You have, and I just want to remind everyone, the board is volunteer, you know, the board members are volunteers. And they did an admirable job of doing what they could to hold it together, but they didn't have any staff or any of them.
Yes, I do understand.
So you come in on the ground level.
Solicitor, we have a question.
I think the absolute wrong time.
Oh, no, so should I?
With all these, what I do after.
Want to just continue this matter. Now, the appointment ends on December 31st. Would the director become an at-will employee, or what happens if we just wanted to hear a little more of a plan on the engagement piece?
So I'm just trying to remember whether or not the appointment of director, how that looks like in the ordinance itself. And whether or not the criminal charter provides. So long story short, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but what this board could do. Is you could refer it back to council without a recommendation, and then that's something that I could look into and get back to you on. If that's.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And I can just add technically that even a reappointment, even though it's for a term of 2 years, it doesn't guarantee me a job for 2 years. That, you know, I think every director is going to have, we're still at-will employees. And so the board could say tomorrow, we want another director and terminate. I mean, there isn't some provision there that says that I can't be terminated. The idea is, you know, are we looking at continuity of operations? I'm happy to do whatever you want. And I have no personal qualm or issue, whatever, you know, you decide here. I'm fully committed to continuing the mission and trying to do what I can, and I just want to make sure that if my term expires and I'm not reappointed, that it doesn't mean that at December 31st, I'm no longer able to do anything, you know, for
And that
I'm not an employee anymore.
that would not be our intention.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want that to happen. So anyway, what would you think? What are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, well, the more I think about it, Thursday is the last council meeting, the calendar year, so I mean, if you know, whatever we do with him, isn't gonna be on the agenda.
Could it get on the special committee?
It's on the special, it will get on a special agenda.
Next
We have a special council meeting on the 14th. For 2 reasons. First, passage of CIP and this appointment. If we choose to move forward on that.
So Helen,
Yes,
so
yes.
logistically, if we, instead of holding this, because then it would just completely miss everything, if we or if we pass without recommendation, it could be on the December 14th agenda, and that gives the solicitor's office more time to figure out, like, if we certainly don't want you to turn into a pumpkin. I also don't want to set you up for failure at a city council meeting. That would be completely unfair to you. So if that seems like maybe the best path forward, if we're not ready to make a positive recommendation today, to just pass it back and get that information and follow up with you quickly in the meantime.
And then we can report back at the council meeting and take action. At the council meeting,
On the
that's
14th.
Yeah, I think that's which is
Because either way, it would only be.
at the special, just so that we can, you know, I want to continue this discussion because I think it's been a very productive discussion and I really appreciate. I have to say everything you're doing to build. The piece that is of critical importance, I think that's been discussed here, is the community engagement piece, and if we could continue that conversation after giving you some time and us some more time, then I would like to revisit that, and so, yes, I think that might not be a bad idea.
So, and then we find out soon what the path forward is, because yeah, I also just wouldn't want to set him up for failure, but it sounds like no matter what, it wouldn't be on Thursday's agenda this Thursday.
No.
So no matter what, regardless what we did, the earliest should be 14th, which is what we're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then I would, make the motion to pass without recommendation back to the full committee.
Second,
I'm sorry. can
A motion to make no recommendations.
Approve without recommendation?
Not
It's
you're all allowed to
refer,
say.
refer.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Yeah. So you're earning that compliment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, the motion was made by Councilor Anderson, and seconded by Councilor Sanchez, all in favor? Aye, all opposed. We so appreciate you coming, and we can't wait to continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, please.
I also want to thank, the para members who are here, especially the chiefs who and work with, but also Sunita for being here. Yeah. In support, and we'll keep, like, we want to respect your time and follow up as well.
And if it would be easier for you to send the communications we haven't received to Aaron, that would be great. And we'll get those right out too, so that people can see them, and then we'll, hopefully continue this conversation. Okay. Thank you so much.
Motion to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn.
second.
Seconded by Councilor Sanchez, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you. Oh, good, yeah, we'll move from here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't know if I was like looking at anyone weird, but my contacts are so